Good morning, gardening friends. It's July 1st at just before noon. Plans change, plans evolve. Here's the plan. I had mentioned before that there was just so much going on in this planter in bad shape that I decided it's time to sacrifice a few plants that were just dying. Just don't try and bring them back anymore. I am frugal, but at some point you got to realize, especially if you've got a ton of seeds lying around, that you could just sort of get rid of a couple of plants that didn't survive grasshoppers or whatever. The greens especially, the grasshoppers were just chewing on. So the plan, and what I've implemented, is on this planter here, I have redone the irrigation. So I've cleared out a bunch of dead stuff from the back. I've pulled off all the dead leaves and everything off of all this nasturtium that I've got up here. Hopefully that'll help bring it back. Since these emitters are really designed to go to a specific plant, or maybe a small group of plants, small grouping of plants, you can see how I have these, the emitters are the red part that you see there. So the water's coming out right near that red disc. So you can see I put it right between the two plants, the two nasturtiums there, right between those two, which kind of leaves the one on the right alone, which actually, that is a nasturtium. And then over here on that grouping. And then in the front I have tomatoes basically. So I've got one for the established 2010 tomato, from which at this point I'm basically just taking cuttings because it's not producing anything else anymore. I'm not getting any actual fruit off of it. So this is really not a plant to be looked at that way, but it is good as a green plant which I can use in hanging planters. We'll get to that in a minute. I've got my tumbler tomatoes, cherry tomatoes here. Those were not doing too well, but I got an emitter right at it there. I got another emitter right here at this. There's actually three plants here, but I got it on the biggest one for now. We'll see how the others survive. It's hooked up to that one tank, which is ultimately going to have to move. Back to that in a minute. And then finally over in this one, the yellow pear tomatoes that I tried to grow before didn't work, so there you go, there's a seed packet to remind me. I planted these yesterday, June 30th, put a couple of seeds right where that emitter is, and so when I load it up with water, it'll drop water right onto the seeds. Hopefully they like it more than what they were getting before. I just got to remember to actually get water into that container each day. Then it actually, now with the redesign or update, it actually slides down and goes into that medium planter. So you can see there's one emitter there, and there's another emitter over there, and that should take care of the two squash plants, which are the most important to me. Corn, we're getting into a season I can buy corn. It's just too much in one planter. I'll try and water before I go on vacation and after I come back from vacation, so maybe they seem fairly hardy, although you can kind of see they're browning a little bit. So that's it with those. As for all of the smaller, sorry about that, the smaller planters here, I think what I'm going to do, rather than trying to do a whole irrigation system here, which ends up getting fairly costly, those emitters alone were 10 pack for $6, and if you're being frugal, that's too much. These are, I should say, the plants are doing really nicely, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move a lot of these plants over to another location right before I take off on vacation, and I'll have somebody that can actually water those plants. So, you know, thankfully they're all in small boxes here. I can move them like 2 at a time and get them over there. I can get most of them over there. I'll leave some of them here, and then that leaves what to do with the corners here. So I'm going to need this corner over here where I've got this plant with the red flowers, beautiful plant, I just keep forgetting the name. I'm going to have to move this out of the way because I want to take that container that's up on top of the air conditioner and put it over here so I can have somebody actually come up with a water bottle and with a watering can or whatever, fill it with water. But I'm going to build a little structure here so it doesn't look too nasty just sitting on the corner there as people walk by. So I want it to look, you know, more like the theme of these boxes that I have here. But in order to put that container there, I have to move the plant. The plan is to move that plant over to this corner. Moving it over to this corner means I have to move that plant back there, which is a flowering bush that's been growing for over a year. It's a very slow grower, but you'll see in a second where I'm going to put that plant. And I'm going to put that plant here, but in order to do that I need a box, which is part of the plan, which I have just finished nailing. So that's all the components of the box. I won't get into the design per se, except, let's see, 30 inches on the wide, 21 on the narrow, which actually makes it 30 by 24. We've got 7.5 inch wide cedar boards and strapping to put all this together. If you think about it, 7.5 inch wide cedar boards times 4 of them makes 30 inches, so that works out nicely. And the strapping is being used as skids, so if we have to move the box out of its place, once it's filled with dirt, it's going to be rather heavy, but those skids can be essentially sacrificial, or at least they serve two purposes. One, they make it easier to move the entire box, and two, once I drill holes in here for drainage, it'll actually raise it off the ground by about 3/4 of an inch, which should be just enough to actually let some water drain out so it doesn't just rot the bottom of the box. So that's that box, and now let's drill some holes. There's something to be said about having the right bit. I just drilled, 3, 6, 9, 12 holes in less than a minute. Didn't give me any kind of resistance, just went right on through. So I love a good drill bit for drilling holes. Anyway, that's the box in that condition. And there's the box in position. Actually, I decided to move it forward a little bit. And here's a couple of steadier pictures. And there's a 3 cubic foot bag of soil, compressed a bit, so I'm hoping it'll expand out nicely. Well, there you go, folks. An almost perfect fit. I'm trying to keep my shadow out of here, but that was 3 cubic foot bag, expanded out nicely, left a little bit of room on the top. I have a pot that I'll be transplanting in there that'll help fill in some of the difference, and yeah, I'm sure the soil will settle and we'll figure out where to go from there, but in general my calculations were right. It was pretty darn close to 3 cubic feet. So now let's put some plants. Okay, so now we've got the flowering bush transplanted. That's been sitting on my patio, both my patios, both my gardens for over a year now. Actually, a year and a half, something like that. Anyway, it's transplanted. Now let's see what else we can put in there. Now, first of all, we're going to put in some broom corn. That's this stuff here, which you've seen in some of the other videos. And it grows tall and kind of slender. It looks a little bit like corn, but then instead of ears of corn, you get this stuff on the top. So I'm going to run those up along the back so that it'll grow against the wall and give it some height to start with. All of this is going to be temporary while I let that bush grow. Eventually I'll end up probably pulling all flowers out and just letting the bush itself grow. But as long as this grows as slowly as it does, I might as well put in some flowers for some visual interest. It's kind of, why just have a box full of dirt? Just doesn't really give you much interest. So anyway, I'm going to put in some of that, and then I'll show you what else I'm going to put in. This stuff is really easy to plant. Sorry, I mean to have the thing swinging down in front of you there. It's really easy to plant. I really just kind of pulled a bunch of it off. There's probably way too much in there, but all I'm going to do is just kind of till it back into the soil a little bit. If I leave a little bit on top, it's just once you start growing this stuff and you harvest seeds, you have an abundance of seeds. So that's all I'm going to do is just kind of till that back into the soil, something like that, and we'll move on. Alright, so now I've added some of that roll and grow stuff that I have put in the hanging planters. Put in that much just so that I could kind of leave the spot open in the back. I'm thinking I'm going to put a very thin layer of topsoil. It actually says in the instructions you got to keep it moist while the seeds are germinating. if I go on vacation and somebody forgets, that's not so good. So plus actually just a thin layer of topsoil on top will actually make this all look a little bit nicer, because honestly that white sheet just kind of looks funny. So that's what I'm going to do now. All we need now is water and a little bit of fertilizer. Okay, so that takes care of this planter. Now I just got to water everything else that needs to get watered today, and I think I'm done. Yes, I almost forgot one. See how that tomato plant's hanging so low from that one hanging planter? So I'm going to cut off a piece of that. I'm not going to make it quite as long as before, and replace this one, which just doesn't seem like it survived, with something a little bit smaller, in hopes that that will actually be the key. Smaller one, putting out new roots, has a better chance of surviving, I hope. So let's see. Through the magic of video, voila! And just for the record, here's the one that came out. Didn't put out any roots, it doesn't seem. At least nothing really visible, so that's why it died. Let's hope the other one survives.